Excuse me for a second. This really is Eyes on Success with hosts Nancy Torpey and Peter Torpey. I am Samantha filling in for Nancy and Peter today since they both have laryngitis and can't talk. They should recover soon, but in the meantime, let's get on with the show.
This was constantly, learning how to search the internet and read articles about, the topic that I was writing my book about. And it was, emailing back and forth, and it was learning Word and, how to navigate and edit and do spell check and all the things that I would need just running a life in general, but also spending 4 to 6 hours to distract me. And then also I needed that sense of accomplishment. I needed to know that I could achieve something, that I have value and I have things that I can contribute.
On today's show, we'll be talking about writing a novel as therapy. Some people write for fun or because it is a job. Others have a story they want to share. When Aaron Spelker suddenly lost his sight, he found writing to be both therapeutic as well as a good activity for learning important blindness skills. Hosts Nancy and Peter will talk with Aaron about how writing the Bubonic Reorder helped him navigate in a new world. But first, for our tip of the week, this week's tip comes from Aaron Spelker's personal experience.
Things went a lot smoother for me when I embraced my situation and I accepted I am blind. And so what are the resources available to me? How do I manage and navigate in this life, as opposed to, really hanging on to something that, just isn't going to be there anymore. If you can really embrace it, there are technology, there are things that help you become more independent. There is a community of other blind people who have taught me so much over the course of the last 3 years and helped make my life a lot easier than if I had been sheltered and just been trying to do it on my own. So I really encourage you to, embrace it and, take advantage of the resources and the tools that are available to you, because it'll just make your life a lot easier.
And hopefully anybody who's listening to this show has already embraced their blindness and at least knows some places to go for help and advice and adaptive technology and other aids.
Yeah, information is power.
Support for Eyes on Success is provided by
aphconnectcenter.org, empowering people toward independence and success by providing blogs, information, and resources for individuals of all ages who are blind or visually impaired. Information and referral line are at 1-800-232-5463.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success. Let's start by meeting Aaron.
Hi, I'm Aaron Spelker. I am a 40-year-old male who recently went blind 3 years ago.
And you were sighted your entire life. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went blind suddenly?
Yeah, I was a fully sighted individual. I was actually experienced a freak accident on a vacation. I was in Cancun on my 20-year wedding anniversary with my wife, and we went down to the Cancun beach to check out the ocean, and a big gust of wind blew sand up into my eyes, and all the sand cut and caused abrasions on my corneas, and also introduced a very strong bacteria into my eyes, which caused a massive infection that took about 3.5 weeks that I was in the hospital where they tried to fight off the infection. And after the 3.5 weeks, they did manage to tap down the infection. But by then, the infection and all the medicines to fight the infection had made it so that all I can see is a little bit of light perception. So I can see where a light is in a room or a window in a room. I can sense where the light's from, but that's all I can see now.
And I understand that professionally, you were involved in some sort of financial services?
Yeah, I was a co-owner of a financial services firm where we helped companies set up their retirement plans, their pension plans, 401k plans, 403b plans, and worked with the employees about helping them strategize and save for their retirement.
You said was. Are you no longer?
Yeah, when I went blind, I really didn't know how, the process of recovery would be and how long it would take me to get on my feet. And, for my clients who are, these are, saving for their retirement. I mean, these are really important things. I thought the right thing to do would be sell my stake in the company to my partner and let him be fully in charge of the day to day, so that he could do right by the client. So I sold out my share of the business, and I really decided to concentrate on figuring out what is life after losing your sight, because it's a very different world to engage with when you have vision versus when you don't.
In a separate episode, we talked about your love of gaming and how you've been able to continue doing that in spite of losing your vision.
Yeah, I started a group called Mobile Accessible Games, which is all about finding and reviewing games that are accessible for blind and visually impaired people, because it's really just a mere fraction of games that have some form of accessibility, and they're really hard and difficult to find. And I decided, since I was struggling so hard finding a list of games that I could play after I lost my sight, that I would curate that list and make it available for the blind and visually impaired community, in one spot where they could find all these accessible games that they could play over a wide variety of genres.
Eyes on Success is made possible in part by our corporate partners. Underwriting pairs the impact of targeted marketing with the integrity of community goodwill.
Learn more by sending an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
This week's focus topic is how writing his novel The Bubonic Reorder helped Aaron Spelker transition to his new blindness and to gain skills he now needs.
Well, Aaron, your journey is a very interesting one. I almost consider myself lucky sometimes that I've been blind essentially since birth, because I would think that if you've been used to seeing your entire life and then suddenly lose your sight, it's very difficult because you're used to relying on your sight and doing things that way. Can you talk a little bit about how that transition went for you and how you made it through that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And as I talk to people who've been fully blind versus people who've lost their sight, particularly suddenly later in life, we kind of face different things. Again, I have a foot that is still in a vision world where I think about things from a vision standpoint, or I think about how I used to do things when I could see. Before, if I wanted to go to the CVS in my town, that's a jump in my car, drive down there, pick up what I need, back in 10 minutes. And now it's an ordeal of arranging an accessibility ride and having someone help me, navigate the store, or, get Ira on the phone to get someone to, help me navigate that store, and then wait around for a ride to get home again. And suddenly, this 10-minute thing is an hour and a half ordeal to pick up, whatever I need at that CVS. And it's a frustration because I know how it should be, or how it was for me before I went blind. So there's a lot of, frustration around everything's a little bit harder and a little bit slower when you don't have vision. And also there's a sense of there's a little bit more, or a little less, I should say, independence, and a little bit more reliance on other people to help you do things that you used to, be able to do fully on your own.
How did you get introduced to some of the resources and services that are available to people who are blind? Because I understand you took those up pretty quickly. JAWS, you use a screen reader.
That was also one of the interesting struggles. I think the whole infrastructure and resource of blind support, I think, is really geared towards people who have been blind all their life. There's a lot of, schooling and resources and, employment things that are geared around, people from, who have been blind all their life. I really kind of struggled of finding those resources to start. Where do I go? How do I deal with this? I actually got lucky in that I had a insurance policy out of myself, and it was actually the insurance agent or customer service person who said, "All right, well, what state do you live in? Here are some resources. Call these people up to help you get started." And so, it was through my insurance company that I first heard about some of the services. I live in Massachusetts, and there is a facility called the Carroll Center for the Blind, who does blind rehabilitation for people who have lost their sight, and teaches them. They have kind of a long program, like you live there for 6 months, and they teach you everything about living as a blind person. I have a young family, so I really couldn't step away for 6 months. So I went there about 4 months after losing my sight for a 2-week intensive training on the computer. How to use JAWS, how to use Word, and surf the internet and, answer my emails. So that's how I kind of got started. And then just last fall, I did a kind of a 7-week more intensive course. And probably the best thing about that course was I was in a room of a lot of accomplished blind people who, they taught me a lot of things about just daily living life. And that's actually when I first heard about IRA. And they said, "Oh, just call up IRA." And I said, "What's IRA? I don't know what that is." And they explained to me the service of IRA, of calling an agent who can look through your camera and help describe to you what you're engaging with, or, where the bathroom is, or whatever the case may be. So I learned a lot from a lot of other blind people.
It's interesting that you say you learned about some of these services and resources from your insurance agent. It's been one of my pet peeves that ophthalmologists don't routinely recommend these same services and resources that they really ought to know about. They just treat your eye condition, and they don't talk about how to lead your daily life and how to do the things you want to do in general.
Yeah, it seems as easy as a pamphlet. Here you go. Here's the blind pamphlet. Here's all the resources and all the contact numbers.
So you said you use a screen reader, an IRA. Do you use a cane or a guide dog, or what other assistive devices do you make use of?
My first 2 years or so, I was a cane user. In April of 2021, I got a guide dog. So he's been with me for 14, 15 months now. So that's been a really great experience, and has really ramped up my own mobility and independence. Luckily, I live an easy walk to the center of the town I live in, which has pretty much all the things that you need. So I really can be pretty independent and live a life of running all my own errands, and not asking my wife to drive me here or there and help me out. I try to really work hard on only asking for help if there's really no opportunity for me to be able to accomplish it on my own.
So you mentioned you have a young family. Pete's been blind essentially since birth. So when our kids were born, he was already blind, and they never knew any different. How old were your kids when you lost your sight?
My daughter was 10, 11-ish, and my son was about 14 when I lost my sight 3 years ago.
How was the adaptation for them? I mean, it's very different having a blind father from a sighted father.
Yeah, I don't know. Me and my wife question this a lot. I mean, they seem like they have gone with the flow of it. I mean, me and my wife really tried to not make it a big deal as much as we could, and just, all right, this is the cards I have. How do I deal with those cards and move forward? And be productive as a member of society as much as I can. I feel like we've done our best I can to minimize the impact on them. Again, a big help was I happen to have a big insurance policy on myself, so from a standpoint of financially, it wasn't like anything changed from a financial standpoint for our family. I think that made things pretty easy, because we as parents weren't worried about that piece of the equation. We really could just concentrate on the blindness of living in a blind world. So, we feel like they're doing well, but, I think it's kind of, you don't really know what might be under the surface. So, we from time to time make sure that they, talk to people and get some counseling, and just to be sure that they're okay. Because that's one of the worries of, how much is it really impacting them. But we try our best to make it as easygoing as possible, and, not be around eggshells on daddy, and worry about daddy. I still do all my chores and take out the garbage and empty and fill the dishwasher and do all the things that I was doing before. I just have to do them a little differently now.
So it sounds like you went through this very difficult transition very quickly because of the way it happened, and also very successfully, and picked up on a lot of these tools and made a lot of changes in your life. And we mostly talked about sort of picking up the mechanics of being blind in terms of accessibility tools and interacting with other people, how to get everything done throughout the day. But there also had to be a large emotional change and how to deal with that. And I understand that in the process of making this transition, you were writing a book, and you found that to be very therapeutic in helping you get over this change. Can you talk about the book, first of all, and then how that helped you make this transition?
So the book that I took the time to write is called The Bubonic Reorder. It's kind of a story about a global pandemic that spreads in the year 2020. Let me step back just a little bit. Again, emotionally, it was a pretty devastating thing. I walked out of that hospital and I realized, wait, I'm blind, and I'm going to be blind. There's really nothing to solve that problem. And the first couple months, I was, just emotionally wrecked. I mean, really kind of not usually a person who wallows in, in something that's gone wrong, but that this was a hard one to bounce back from. And as I said, I got hooked up with the Mass Commission for the Blind, and before my training class that I was going to go to, where I said I did that 2-week crash course, they sent out an individual to my house to load JAWS onto my computer and prep of that class. And I let the guy into my house and into my office, and I could tell, just from context clues that he was visually impaired in some way. And he got on my computer and he started having JAWS talk to him, and he loaded all the software up onto my computer and got it all set up, and was there for like an hour, downloading things from the internet and setting up profiles and setting all those settings on JAWS. And at the end, I turned to him and I said, well, look, tell that you're visually impaired. Do you mind me asking, how much sight do you have to be able to do all the things that you're doing? And he said, I'm totally blind. I've been blind since birth. And that was really kind of a Kickstarter for me of, I'm sitting here, I'm really upset, I'm wallowing about all these things that I can't do anymore. And here's a guy who has a professional career. He's great at the computer, better at a computer than I ever was as a sighted person. And, there is a life to live here. And why am I sitting on the couch not living that life? And that was kind of the start of, well, what am I going to do? And he had loaded JAWS onto my computer, and he had shown me how to, surf the internet and how to, operate Word and my email. And I decided that there had been a book idea that I had been considering that I thought up of about 5 years earlier, and had done a little bit of work on researching and making some outlines. But I said, I'm going to dedicate myself to writing this book. So I decided to sit down and actually start writing that book, which I spent the entire rest of 2019, which is the year I went blind, writing the book and finishing the book at the end of December of 2019.
What's interesting about that process is it's not only providing a distraction for you to get through this process while you're going through it, but it's also an opportunity to be using the tools that you're trying to learn and really learn them well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm one of those learners by doing and, consistently using. If I did it for a week and then didn't touch it for 2 months, then I would totally forget, how did I do that? So this was constantly using, learning how to search the internet and read articles about, the topic that I was writing my book about. And it was, emailing back and forth, and it was learning Word and, how to navigate and edit and do spell check and all the things that I would need just running a life in general, but also spending 4 to 6 hours to distract me. And then also, I don't think I realized it at the time, but I realized it, kind of after I was done with the book, was I needed that sense of accomplishment. I needed to know that I could achieve something, that I have value and I have things that I can contribute.
And this book is not about being blind, since the concept was conceived before you went blind, but the topic is very timely.
Yeah, it is. It's called the Bubonic Reorder, which is named after the bubonic plague. So the book, which I thought of the concept back in 2014, happens to be about a global SARS pandemic that strikes the world and goes out of control in the year 2020. And as I said, I finished that book at December of 2019, so a few months before COVID-19 occurred.
So did you feel guilty when it came true?
It's really scary because a lot of the things I write in the book happen almost exactly how COVID-19 happened. And I don't put that as much as, like I'm some Nostradamus, but I spent 5 years reading a lot of research and, all the white papers and scientific papers and things I was reading about modern, pandemic spreads and how they would occur, really described it exactly how COVID-19 happened. The big thing and kind of a lot of the premise of the book is you're not going to have a virus, a modern day virus spread like an old time virus where it would spread, village to village, town to town. And how you would deal with it is you would isolate and quarantine, and that's how you would get through until the pandemic burnt itself out. But in a modern pandemic, when we can be halfway across the globe in 12 hours, if a virus spikes like that, it's going to spread instantaneously around the world in, all these multiple different pockets, and it's going to be impossible to quarantine it and isolate it from spreading. So once it starts, it's going to quickly and rapidly grow out of control. And that's, basically all the research papers that I was reading. It was kind of explaining not if a pandemic happens, but when it happens, this is how it's going to happen. So, COVID-19 was not, and particularly how it occurred, was not a big surprise to me. I mean, kind of a surprise that it happened 3 months after I wrote this story, but not a surprise that it would happen.
And we have all had the dubious pleasure of experiencing this pandemic.
Yeah, my kids kind of joke that, the next book I write, I got to write in that we win the lottery and like lots of good things happen to us.
I'm guessing that you did a lot of research for this book, and the research you did was by using some of your newly acquired skills with a screen reader and other assistive devices.
Yeah, exactly. I learned, JAWS, learned how to, navigate websites and use, headings and, all that sort of thing, and how to, make JAWS, just continually read a story to me. I learned the struggles of, stories that were downloaded as PDFs, and then you find out the PDF is not accessible. So, there's some frustrations that I learned about as I was navigating of things that are still not accessible to the blind and visually impaired. But it really was a great tool set to, if you can learn how to research a paper for, all this scientific stuff, you can learn how to read the latest news or the latest book review of a story. It's very easily transferable skills. So, again, that 4 to 6 hours a day I was spending writing this book, it was also teaching me how to just live in a blind world naturally when I wasn't writing a book as well.
I'm impressed that you seem to have picked up using these tools effectively so quickly. Were you kind of a techie guy by nature, or was it just because of the amount of time you were spending with the tools that made it work?
A little bit of both. I was a person who would pick up a new software, pretty easily and get pretty proficient at it. But I also had a lot of time, like for the phone, learning voiceover and the gestures on the phone. I was in a room for 3.5 weeks. The medicine that they gave me, that gave me topical eye drops to fight off this bacteria, they had to give it to me every hour. So I never slept more than 59 minutes at a time for 3.5 weeks.
Oof.
So I was up, many, 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 many hours and bored out of my skull. And I said, well, I know there's voiceover. I had actually heard about voiceover from commuting one time on the train. I sat next to a blind person who was using voiceover, and I just happened to get in a conversation with him about, how does that work? And, he was kind of showing me stuff. So I just kind of knew from the back of my brain from that experience, maybe, 10 years ago, that voiceover existed. So I figured out how to turn on voiceover, had a nurse help me figure out how to turn it on. And then I was just 3.5 weeks just flicking with the phone and tapping and gesturing until I figured out how to, answer emails and how to watch movies on Netflix. And, just had all the time in the world to just play with it, basically 24 hours a day for 3.5 weeks until I learned it. So necessity, as well as a little bit of tech sense and time allowed me to become pretty proficient pretty quickly.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to put in the time to learn a new tool and have a little patience.
Yeah. There's funny things too that I think about, like I can't tell you the amount of work that I get done now when my wife's asleep in bed next to me and I'm still like watching a movie or answering emails because, I don't need to actually look at it. I'm just listening to it in my headset. I get a lot more work done during that time. Podcasts, like I can't believe I ever listened to a podcast on normal speed. Like now I listen to it at two times speed and I get through twice as many podcasts as I normally would have got to. So there's a couple of advantages that I was like, well, I wish I didn't go blind to know about these things. I wish I had just known about, just put it on 2 times speed. You'll get through everything a lot faster. And then there's funny things too, like when me and my wife will watch movies and I'll have a headset on so I can listen to the audio description and she'll just be, listening to it regular off a TV. And she like doesn't know characters' names, like because they're always telling me, Jake, picked up the bottle and put it in the refrigerator. And she's like, "What's this guy's name?" I was like, "Oh, that's Jake." And she's like, "How do you know this?" I'm like, "Oh, well, they constantly tell me, this is Jake. That's Jim. They constantly are announcing their names, so I know all the characters' names." There's often where audio description will point something out that is important to the plot device that, if you didn't catch it visually, you might not realize that that was something important. So I'll tell her about some clues that I think this is going to be important because audio description's telling me about it. So there's some advantages that come with the technology and the things that I'm using now than, just doing vision only.
Along those same lines, I think of Nancy using an iPhone or a computer, and there are all these pictorial icons on there that sometimes she has no idea what they are. Mm-hmm. But when you're using a screen reader or voiceover, those all have text labels associated with them. So I'm always telling her what they are.
Yeah, or at least you hope they do, right?
Right. Writing this book seemed like a very positive experience for you, both in terms of distracting you while you were going through the blindness transition and learning some new tools. Are you considering writing another book?
There is a story that I'm contemplating about the characters in this book. They kind of end at a certain spot, and there is a potential story to tell after that. So I'm kind of kicking around whether to do that or just let it be where it is. Let that story just end where it is.
It may have served its purpose.
Right.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success. Now for this week's final item: how to get the Bubonic Reorder and how to contact its author, Aaron Spelker.
Well, Aaron, remind us again about the name of the book and tell us where people can get the book.
The name of the book is The Bubonic Reorder, which is named after the bubonic plague. And you can find it out on Amazon, both ebook and paperbook, Barnes & Noble, I believe paperbook and ebook on there as well. And I donated the book to Bookshare. So if you have a Bookshare account, you can feel free to just download it for free and enjoy it. I also have, for just news and content and updates about the book, I have a Facebook page called The Bubonic Reorder, and you can find out, news, whether it be about, sales that are happening on the book or an interview that has occurred about the book. All kind of news about the book is posted to that Facebook page.
You mentioned during the introduction, and we did another entire episode about accessible gaming. Can you tell people about how they would find all of that?
Yeah, the main source of information is a Facebook group called Mobile Accessible Gaming. I'm very involved in that group, on it hours a day, fielding questions. And so anybody who wants to reach out to me can feel free to, post to the group or reach out on Facebook Messenger directly to me. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that they have. I also have a Twitter account also called Mobile Accessible Games, where people can hear news about accessible gaming. And then I interview game developers and accessibility influencers on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Aaron Spelker, which is Aaron, S as in Sam, P as in Peter, Elker.
As always, if you missed any of the links or phone numbers, they're all in the show notes, which you can find at our website, www.eyesonsuccess.net. That's it for show number 2244. Next week on Eyes on Success, we'll be talking about the Waymap navigation system. The Waymap app was designed to assist visually impaired people navigate transportation systems in cities around the world. The app is accurate down to 1 meter both indoors and outdoors. We'll talk with CEO Torpey about the motivation for developing the app, how it works, and their plans to expand its use. It's been fun joining you this week, but Nancy and Peter are hoping to regain their voices in time to host next week's episode.
You've been listening to Eyes on Success, hosted and produced by Nancy Goodman-Torpey and Peter Torpey.
You can access the full archive of previous shows, subscribe to the podcast, and much more by going to our website, www.eyesonsuccess.net. If you have questions about anything you've heard on the show or have suggestions for future shows, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.